At this point, I'm very happy to introduce our first panel to talk about something we've heard referenced several times this morning, the Cyber Resilience Act. So if I could ask Riccardo Masucci, Director of Security and Technology Policy for Intel and Chair of the Cybersecurity Coalition EU Working Group, to come up, and the rest of the panelists. Take it away.
Michael. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. While we wait for our distinguished speakers to, please.
How many are we?
Yeah, take the order that you prefer.
Maybe
Yes.
one. Look, there's a rooster in the chicken.
Don't.
Good morning, everyone. Again, Riccardo Masucci, work with Intel, Director of Security and Technology Policy, and today I have the pleasure and the privilege to moderate this panel on the Cyber Resilience Act, together with these distinguished speakers, starting from Christiane Kirchreiter de Viron, Head of Unit Cybersecurity and Digital Privacy Policy at the European Commission. Welcome and thank you for coming. At my right, we have Kias Lebeck Jensen, Defense Advisor, Cyber and Hybrid Threat at the Danish Permanent Representation. Welcome and thanks for joining us. Marilyn van der Marlere, sorry for butchering the name, General Counsel at Integrity, also joined the panel. And last but not least, our very own Florian Pennings, Director of Cybersecurity at Microsoft. Thanks, Florian. We heard from Despina and from Christian very eloquently the reasons why cybersecurity will be top priority for the next Commission. We also heard how important legislation is in this space, considering the number of cyber threats and cyber attacks. And so the CRA has a comprehensive legislation that is looking at increasing requirements and risk management practices across the spectrum of all digital products, is becoming a foundational piece of the regulatory framework of the European Union. But as we heard in the keynote speeches, now it's all about implementation, right? And so I would like to start with this, talking a bit about the lawmaking process and the next steps, because it seems that it's over. The political agreement was found, but it's not yet over, and there are, although a lot of progress was done, there are still things that needs to be addressed. And so, Christiane, I would like to start with you by asking, more clarity on timeline, next steps, adoption, etc.
Okay, thank you. And also thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. I'm also happy because it's always an opportunity to learn new things. I have, for instance, now learned that Christian is a Swiftie, which is certainly something I'm going to take home with me and use it for other purposes. But anyway, I'm very happy to be here also to talk about my favorite topic these days, which is implementation. And I was also very happy to hear coming from the Berlaymont that we should be focusing in the next mandate on implementation, because it is literally something that we're told wherever we go now. We have the frameworks in place. Let's use them. Let's implement them properly. So that's what we're very busy with now. Actually, inside the Commission, of course, we have the Cyber Resilience Act. We expect it to be entering into force still in the course of 24. That means we have the clock starts ticking, and we'll have 3 years. Before the essential requirements will be applied. And also we don't have to forget 21 months for the reporting to start. So that means that there's a whole body of work that has to be done before we get to that. On the one hand, of course, we have a number of statutory deadlines. There are things within the legal framework that we have to do. So we have 2 implementing acts and a delegated act coming still this year, including technical description of the important critical product categories that you will see in the annex. So those product categories that would either apply harmonized standard or would go through third-party conformity assessments. but we also have on format and procedures for the notifications, and this is, I know is very important for industry, the cyber-related grounds for withholding information in certain cases. So these are all the things that are coming out in terms of the secondary level of legislation. Then, of course, we're working a lot on guidelines. I think this is something that's extremely important because we need to get, let's say, we need to get the mindset shifting in Europe. We need to get everyone, you cannot wake up as a company the day before it's applied and think, oh, what was CRA actually about? Because this is, of course, something which is a process, and it's also a process within the company. So we would like to come out swiftly, Christian, with guidelines, so that we can also help this process for our stakeholders. So here, this is an area where we're very keen to hear from stakeholders. Also, what are the things they would like to have guidance on? Of course, we are already discussing with industry and industry associations, but I would also, of course, like to say that we are also here to extend the invitation to everyone here that this is something where we would like to have your input. There's also a long list of guidance that are in the CRA. I'm not going to be mentioning all of them to you here, but there are some topics, I would say, on the scope of the CRA, including remote data processing, expected lifetime, interplay with other legislation, and what is actually the meaning of substantial modification. And again, these are things that are super important for the industry to understand as soon as possible, because it's all about how industry will, of course, plan its processes. Then there's a gigantic, I would say, body of work around standardization. So the CRA, of course, covers literally every product with digital elements, or a few that are carved out. So the car industry, for instance. But there is a lot of work going into actually having these standards ready in time. We're looking, of course, at having in place a certain level of horizontal standards, but where it's also very clear for us that we need to have vertical standards in order to give the, let's say, ensure that we have standards in place that can really give conformity, on the different product categories. And that's, of course, extremely important for those product categories that find themselves on the list of important. So those that would need to apply a harmonized standard. So here we are preparing our standardization request. We already had a preliminary standardization request out for consultation. But you can expect the official one to come very soon as, of course, we have the CRA officially adopted. And here again, we have an extremely strong commitment to not reinvent the wheel. So we are mapping international standards, European standards. We're mapping, we are literally looking at all standards. And here again, I know some of you here in the room has already been very kind and provided us with input. And again, here it's also something where we would like to hear also from industry. We are also very committed to working, of course, with our international partners on this. And I think Despina mentioned our joint cyber-safe product action plan. So I don't go too much into detail here. But I think the key thing for us here is to be able to align to the maximum extent possible so that we can create mutual recognition conditions, but also to make sure that we can, of course, in the long run, have this transatlantic market for trusted products. And then we're, of course, working on aspects related to the reporting obligations. And the key thing here is that we need to set up a platform. And by we, I mean the European Union, so ENISA. Working together with the CSRT network that can allow for the manufacturers to fill out only one report. So also, again, simplification in the way it's done. And of course, here the absolute key thing is that this report has to be state-of-the-art secure. The reporting platform, of course, not just the reports. Well, both, I suppose. For us, of course, the security of this platform is an absolute priority. So this is like an overall quick run through. of our implementation efforts. I think how we do it, I think the key things for us is speed. It's about simplicity. I think when you know, a lot of people think simplification is something we do in the regulations. No, I don't agree with that. Simplification, the basis for simplification has to be done in the regulation, but implementation is where you do the simplification, because you often find yourself having to you can go down this road or you can go down that road to achieve the same objective. And here it's very, very important that we make the right choices. And I'm not an economist, but I remember something about the Pareto optimal, I think it's called, where you say that, you know, can we achieve the same cybersecurity objectives in a way that is also optimizing, let's say, or minimizing, I would say, the negative impact on industry? This is the way we should be going forward. And the last thing, of course, is to achieve both the speed and the simplicity. It is that we need the stakeholder involvement. So for us, that's the best way of designing rules, is to do it also together with those who will be implementing it. So thank you also for organizing this, and we look very much forward to much more conversations with our stakeholders on this.
Thanks a lot, Christiane. Well, this was a fantastic overview, and you hit a lot of the points that I wanted then to bring into our discussion. So I will try also to do some small deep dives on many of the topics that you raised. Kia, this is now time for implementation, but member states, how are they addressing this, and do they have enough resources? And, you know, big countries, small countries, what can be done for that?
Well, it's varied, I would say, across the member states. I think, again, we are also reliant on the Commission, so we are very happy to hear that they're working on the implementation as well. I think from our side, especially the acts defining the categories that we're looking into is going to be really crucial as we move forward, because we are getting a lot of questions from industry about how exactly, which categories exactly does it mean, and that is something we're looking forward to. I think we might also have given them a stricter deadline in the actual act than they proposed, so we're sorry, we know it's a lot of work. I think there are several different elements. Again, like Christiane said, standardization is going to be key. From our side, super happy again that we're focusing on also mapping the international standards, and from our side, we understand the need to also have vertical standards, but we do prefer as many horizontal as possible. And nationally, we're of course working on placing the responsibility for the implementation. That is always something that I think is forgotten about a bit, that we also have to figure out who exactly is tasked with what when we get to the national level. Luckily, at least in Denmark, we did this in advance while we were negotiating the legal act, so that part is done. We just need to figure out how much money they're going to have to require to actually implement it, and it's no secret that it is quite expensive to have a cyber experts, especially because the authorities that are going to implement a lot of the supervision and the enforcement are not our cybersecurity authorities. Our cybersecurity authority in Denmark is under the Ministry of Defense and is focusing much more on operational and strategic collaboration, and not so much products. They focus on the products they need and use, but not so much product and market supervision, and I don't think anyone would want them to be quite frank. So that is going to go to a market supervision authority. However, they don't have the necessary cyber expertise, and the way we try not to duplicate too many expertises in Denmark, we're a small country and cyber expertise is already limited, so we're working a lot with the collaboration agreements between different authorities so that we know how to collaborate and how to get the exchange of information necessary as we move forward. We've done that previously as well. We've done it in the light of our national cybersecurity strategy with different authorities. Also, NIS 1 and NIS 2 is a bit decentralized in its implementation in Denmark. So we have So it's not just one authority that's responsible, it's more the sectoral authorities, because we use sectoral responsibility, which I won't bore you with. But just to say, we're quite accustomed to having this close collaboration across multiple fields. And that's also something we're going to focus on within the implementation of the CRA. However, we still do need more people to look at this because of the scale of the scope of CRA. It requires more people to be able to supervise this efficiently. And that's something we're looking into now. We have our internal policies for that, where we go through the financial ministry, who is a determinant, I'm not going to lie. But of course, we're looking into the scope and how we implement this the best possible. And then, of course, for the reporting obligations, which are coming sooner, we're going to collaborate through the CSATs network, where the Danish CSAT is part, with the NISA to make sure we get a secure platform as possible. I think from our side, it's really important that there is buy-in from the CSATs and the national member states who have experience with this. In Denmark, we already have a single reporting platform for IT incidents that go across that collects both incidents regarding GDPR, but also NIS1, soon-ish NIS2. So we have some experience with how to build such a platform. Of course, the scale is much bigger here, but at least we have some experiences that we hopefully will be able to utilize. Of course, depending on how exactly we build it.
Thank you. Well, so resources, people, tools, processes. How industry is getting ready to comply with CRA. I would start with Marilyn maybe, and then transition to Florian, and it's also the time for you to say which are the concerns regarding the implementation.
Thank you. Well, first of all, how are we implementing, or how should we be preparing? I'd say let's all take on Christian's offer and reach out and share our knowledge in terms of how can we optimize implementation, where as cybersecurity players or industry players can we share a certain expertise to help facilitate the process. In terms of integrity, we connect. We operate a crowdsourced security platform, Integrity, whereby we connect a community of 90,000 ethical hackers with companies who would like to see the security of their systems being tested. So we connect both parties, and we collaborate on both sides. On client sides, industry players who will need to comply with the Cyber Resilience Act. We have certain concerns that we would like to facilitate with, that we can help with by giving our opinion, also our view on specifically vulnerability reporting processes to the Commission. And on the other hand, we have the community of ethical hackers who are also benefiting from the implementation of the Cyber Resilience Act, who can contribute to the vulnerability information that the Commission would like to receive, that to developing that common database of vulnerabilities. So when we first took a look at the CRA, when we were first informed and took a look at the legislation, we had two main concerns. One of them was the feedback from a lot of clients, from a lot of industry players, saying the notification of unmitigated vulnerabilities is really one of the things that we would really like to avoid. However, we've seen that legislation, the draft legislation, evolve, and we are very happy with the evolution that has taken place. And seeing the notification requirements evolve from mitigating any and all vulnerabilities within a very short period of time without any possible mitigation or patch being in place, towards having a more protective reporting requirement that gives companies the opportunity to mitigate, to patch, and to share information once it is really useful for clients that use the digital products, or for other industry players to get that information and also be able to patch vulnerabilities in a similar manner. On the other hand, we have our researchers And one of the concerns that we also had when seeing these notification requirements was how open will companies be into, how receptive will they be into receiving information about their vulnerabilities, noting that they need to report these same vulnerabilities immediately. So we are very pleased to see that the notification requirements go hand in hand with the requirement to have a vulnerability disclosure policy in place, and more importantly, a requirement to actually follow up on vulnerabilities that have been received. Because it's very important to understand that a few years ago, we did some surveys within our researcher database. Numbers are a bit outdated, but I think probably today they are more or less still accurate. Almost 40% of security researchers reporting a vulnerability were not able to get to the right person and to actually have companies act upon that information that they have provided. So that is also something that we, as industry player, would like to help, would like to give guidance on how can we make sure that a vulnerability disclosure policy is set up in the right manner, actually bringing value. How can companies make sure that they have the means, the resources to follow up on these vulnerabilities and actually gain the effect that we want to achieve with the Cyber Resilience Act, rather than bringing something in place simply for the purpose of complying with a certain law.
Thanks a lot, Marilyn. And Florian, speed and simplification, how do you see it?
So first of all, so thanks. As you'll see on the agenda, I was actually supposed to talk about vulnerabilities, and then I got asked on this one. So I will skip the vulnerabilities because you got a great input here already. But I want to start off with one element, and that's about stakeholder involvement, and I'll end with that as well. On the CRA, I have to give a big compliment, because the stakeholder involvement and the openness of the European Commission from the beginning up until this moment has been really good. Because we are now in the implementation phase, so we also need to recognize that. And this is the first thing that I really want to say. And this has been wider than the European Commission, also the attachés. We really have struggled with this and have had a lot of discussions, because it's very technical and we need to do that. So the fact that we've seen that, I want to acknowledge that and really say that that's really good. So please keep on doing that, because now the time is to look at how are we going to twist the buttons, how are we going to clarify, how are we going to implement this, and we cannot do this without each other. So that's the highlight actually. But there's ambiguity still in there. There's still ambiguity in the Cyber Resilience Act, and I think Christiane will be the first one to acknowledge that, as well as some of the attachés, things that you just can't hash out in the legislative negotiations. Some of those things are the exclusion of software as a service, but then the inclusion of remote data processing. We'd like to know a little bit better, what does that mean? SBOMs. Great example that we imported sort of speak from the US into the EU legislation. The formats, how are they going to be defined and designed? Super important. Look at each other. I mean, look at the US and look at what happens in the EU and at national level in the EU as well. And then also the OSS, open source software, the stewards. It's a new term. How do we really work with that, and how do we implement that? And that also brings me to another compliment. Yeah, I'm positive today. And that's the joint CyberSafe product action plan, as well as the cyber incident harmonization that we saw between DHS and Connecta being released. We welcome these examples because it shows, okay, you're really listening, you're sitting down, and of course we would like to see a little bit more about the joint action plan on the products, what's happening in there. But these are the examples where we think, okay, great, we see that the different legislators are trying to find each other. Keep on doing that, because in the end of the day, it's about harmonization, and the transatlantic approach there is something that we really, really support. That takes me to standards. Standards, we hear it a lot, and to be quite honest, I'm not at all a standard expert, but through the CRA, you have to become a little bit of an expert. What I just see there is that you've got a group of people in CEN-CENELEC and also in ISO and all the other standard organizations that are screaming very loud, this is too much, we can't handle it. And they're experts. They're not people like me. They're not people that are doing the legislation all the time. These are really experts that on top of their work normally sit a couple of hours, sometimes whole days into these sessions. If they voice up and they say, hey, this is too much for us, we need to listen. So we need to really help them to prioritize. And from what I understood from some of the colleagues, that there's a lot of different standards probably going to be applicable to the CRA implementation. We need to help there. And that's not only a European Commission and Parliament Council, but it's also us as an industry. And if you invite us, we're ready to help there. The last point on substance, yeah, I do want to say one thing about reporting. That's the single reporting platform to be hosted at ENISA, by ENISA. We have a lot of questions around that, because I remember in the past, for some of you here in the room, I've seen a former colleague of mine from the NCSC. There was a thing called Meli Certis within the CSERT network of the EU. It was a big challenge. Everybody wanted the same, but eventually we didn't get there, and eventually we got there. But the differences there are incredibly important between 27 different CSERTs, 20 different approaches, languages, sizes. Your first question towards Kia, small member states, big member states, take that into account. And then as well, the industry needs to feel comfortable by using these platforms, right? Because if we don't feel comfortable, how do we discuss that? That brings me to my last point. As I said from the beginning, stakeholder inclusion and involvement. This is a great opportunity, but we always suggest make it more structured. Try to find ways to get groups that speak the same language or come from the same sectors or have attention for the same topics and threats, bring them together and also squeeze them for the information to help identify the right challenges, as well as come up with solutions that are being carried by both public and private. Thanks.
Standards and certifications have come up several times in the interventions. Are we going to have the standards ready on time? Are we going to have a deluge of actually common specifications instead of having the possibility then to do certifications? So what's here the position? And I'm looking at Christiane and Kia. How do you see this happening in this time frame?
So for me, it's pretty clear that we have been giving a deadline in our legal act, and that is what it is. And that means that we don't really have much of a choice than to have our standards ready. Now, I also like what you were saying, Florian, that we need to prioritize, because of course it is a lot of work. So we need to be smart in our standardization request. And we need to also understand that, we're not going to create standards for every single product that the CRA is covering in the first go. Standardization will be also a long process, but we have to prioritize the key standards. And for us, those are, including, of course, horizontal, but those are also the standards that will be able to give conformity to the products that are on the critical list. This is extremely important, because if not, we're going to shift a ton of work into the conformity assessment bodies. And they also have to be ready.
There are not many.
Voila. So, that's why, yes, I can acknowledge it's a huge task. I acknowledge also that there are people who are telling us, this is too much, it's a lot, etc. But the fact is that we have been given by our friends, we have in place now a CRA that comes with a legal deadline, and that's just the way it is. And, voila, that's how it works. Not looking specifically at you, of course, Kia, but that's the reality.
Yeah, no, there is a deadline, but it is a longer deadline that the Commission gave itself in the beginning. So, so we have tried to help out a little bit there. No, I mean, again, standards are absolutely crucial, and prioritization is really important. That is also why we would prefer horizontal standards. And again, and I hate to sit and agree with the Commission so much, I don't usually do that, but for us it is also very crucial that any vertical standards take a look at the important products in the classifications that we have created in the annexes. Those are the ones that are going to be reliant upon this, that can't, and I say just with a really big quotation mark, use self-evaluation, but really do need the standards in order to be in accordance with the CRA. Will we have them in time? I don't know. I can't look into the future in that way. But I will say that in general, very impressed by how quickly the EU and member states in general have moved on cybersecurity when we have to do it. And I think this is a really we have to do it type of situation. So I hope that is going to help on it. I mean, again, it is going to be a really big challenge. There's also a lot of difference between member states in maturity regarding cybersecurity standards. We're not a big member state, but we do have some experts that are quite involved within standardization work. And yes, we are using them a lot right now, and they're tired, but they've been tired since they started working with cybersecurity. So I think it's just comes with the field. Not that they should leave, please don't do that. So I think, I mean, we're hopeful that if we work together, which I feel that there is a big interest in from all member states and also from industry in general, I think we're having a workshop between member states tomorrow organized by the Commission to look at standards, which is for people much more technical than myself. But I think that there is really big interest in making this a success. And I think we have the best possible starting point to do that. Whether or not we will succeed, I hope so, but I know that is going to require that we really work together and also that we are able to prioritize where it's critical. Also, I would say regarding the reporting platform, I can understand there's a lot of questions. It's really hard to put it into legislation how a platform should be built up. It's very technical, and we also didn't want to end up in a situation where the legislation didn't make technical sense. And definitely, I mean, Milicertis, I am aware of the existence, and there's been different, but I also think Milicertis was developed at a different point in the CSAT network's history and a different point in the maturity in collaboration between member states. I think there is in general a bigger understanding, not that that's going to make everything easier, but hopefully that improves somewhat. And we also have a lot more collaboration across CSATs regarding terminology and using the same vocabulary. So I think there is at least a starting point on this. As for creating a database, that's not exactly what we're doing here. This is really to the platform is to send it out. The database that we created in NIS2 is completely separate. We're not going to put these in here again, also because they're actively exploited vulnerabilities that we are put in. So just to make clear that those two things are quite different.
Thank you. And this is a fantastic transition to the incident reporting topic that I wanted to briefly touch upon before we open the floor for questions. And so, Marilyn and Florian, any comment on incident reporting and vulnerability reporting, and all this information that will need to flow from the private sector to government? How do you see it going forward?
Yes, I'll take this one. Thank you. So in terms of vulnerability notification, I think there's two important elements, and I'm already very pleased that I've heard the words simplification today and only one report. I think that is essential for the business, for the industry. There's a lot of recent legislation that requires certain reporting notifications. GDPR, NIS2, now Cyber Resilience Act. It's not easy for companies to comply once there is an incident or a vulnerability coming in. There's a lot of work in thinking about which scope do we reside under. One company can have several products residing under different legislation. So there is already a complexity that companies are being confronted with that they will need to invest resources and time with. So very important indeed that in terms of the reporting requirements, that they're easy, that they're simple. And we have to admit that that's not always the case. The GDPR reporting requirements, let's be honest, in a lot of member states, they are rather complex. You really need a lawyer to help you, while this is cybersecurity legislation. I, as a lawyer, I would really like to stay out of it once there's an incident. I would love for my technical teams to be able to focus on actually mitigating, on resolving the issue, on getting a solution both for the company, the organization, as well as the user themselves. So simplification, really absolutely one single report. Have conversations with industry experts that are handling vulnerability notifications to shape the form and the content of that report and to make it comprehensible for people who need to actually complete it. And on the second topic, touching on something that Bernard already highlighted, the platform. at Integrity, we always look from a hacker's perspective, of course. It's the holy grail. You hack the holy grail and you have all the information that you need to, attack your preferred vector, let's say. So that's a really important one, that there are a lot of concerns about how will we make that happen. There's the single reporting platform, of course, but it's also the connection with the individual member states, passing on that information, communicating that information. And of course, when you have cybersecurity legislation, that is for me one of the essential focus points, and make sure that you have the right people working on that, and that indeed companies can trust when they report their vulnerabilities, their sensitive information, that it will be handled and taken care of in a good manner and not causing additional risks.
Yeah, thanks. So super short, because I see Alex walking around with the microphone saying we need to wrap up, I think. But a little bit of commercial for the panel that I was actually supposed to be on is by Jen Ellens, led by Jen on vulnerability disclosure. So this is really where you will hear Bernard making his point. Please do listen to that one, because that will go much more into detail than we do here. For us as Microsoft, it's not a secret that we've been quite critical about the Article 11 when it comes down to disclosing exploited vulnerabilities without a patch. That's how we put it down. The democratic process led to that it got accepted, so now we need to adopt. And we will adopt and we will comply. The only question that we will have is then in the adoption and the period that we are in right now, start asking yourself the questions about what's need to know, what's nice to know. I have a security background. This is so incredibly important. Not everything is necessary to share. It's nice to know what's the added value. What's the added value of giving a CERT or another designated authority, or even ENISA, highly sensitive information that they might not even understand because they don't have the full picture of where that little vulnerability, which can be very small, sits in a larger ecosystem. How would they know that? I can tell you how they would know that. They will pick up the phone, they start calling our team. Hey, we see this, how does it work? And then the team that originally needs to dive into these topics needs to say, okay, great, we're going to help you. Now, we are going to prepare for this because we have to. But start asking yourself every time, what's the added value? And then the other side is, I do think there needs to be more education. I don't say this a lot, but I do want to say it now, within the public sector, around what products and services are out there, because it happens too often that there is not enough awareness, not because there is not the interest and they don't want to, and the willingness is not there, but the resources are not there. And given the landscape that we have at the moment on all the software that's out there, products and services, this is so incredibly complex. This really requires further investment. And that's really what I think will be the biggest challenge here. Is not going to be the willingness to comply, but it's going to be the unplanned, not knowing what those products and services are, and then trying to put that into context of reporting. Because otherwise it won't have any added value, and that would be a shame.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Florian. I think it's time for a quick question from the audience.
Thank you very much. Hi, Zoe from MasterCard. Thank you for a very, very interesting discussion, and very honest, I also have to say. It's, I think you really addressed all the, critical points we've been discussing throughout the process. First, Christiane, in another conference this week, you mentioned that it takes a village to deliver a project like that. And I really want to acknowledge what also Florian said, that the fact that we are here, a community that we have been meeting throughout the past year so often, it's because the public, the institutions, both the attachés and the Commission and the Parliament, have been very open into exchanging. So I really want to acknowledge that this has been a process where we felt like we were quite heard, and we had serious discussions about everything. So really appreciated that. So following that paradigm in a way, it will take a village to deliver, as you said in the conference. One is to deliver the baby, and then you have to raise the baby. So how are we going to structure a bit this village? We saw in and out of the draft this expert group to support with the guidelines. public-private cooperation, I think everybody has acknowledged that it's very important. So how can we make sure that all players in such a huge project with such a big list of products and different stakeholders, from conformity assessment bodies to SMEs to open source software community, how do we make sure we include everyone, both at the national level, looking at Kia and Christiane at the Commission level? And then just to that point, what do you need from, how do you see public-private cooperation, and what do you need from the private sector to support educating the smaller players as well? In cybersecurity, we always say we are as strong as our weakest link. What is the educational level right now, the awareness? Do all these SMEs out there know that they are suddenly in scope? Do they know what the CE marking means for software? And how do we educate on NLF as well? And how can we be part of that of that process? And that was a very long question, I know.
It was a very long question, and
Thank
we
you
have
very much.
1 minute per speaker, I think, for a quick reaction.
Maybe I will start then. Indeed, I think I said it takes a village, and I hope I also passed that message here, because literally the same way that we have been working in a very open manner when we were developing the framework, the same is needed now. I listed already the different categories. I think awareness I did not list, but it is absolutely essential. We are looking at structuring. Now we are looking at developing a structure for this cyber resilience ecosystem, you could call it, to make sure that there is also an appropriate process in place where we get the input. And I very much like that you're mentioning the SMEs, because that will be, it is a challenge always to be able to actually get SMEs in, because, you know, they may not have the capacity to actually be part of this, even if they are aware. So that will be a challenge, and something that we will also be looking at specifically. I think very clearly on the development of the guidance, I think that is also something where we're very keen on having the input. I don't have the world's biggest team. I would love for it to be much bigger. Just saying. But, and the same will of course also apply to ENISA, and you're absolutely right. We don't have a product security expert for every single product that's on the market. And again, that is why it's very important for us to have these conversations with those who are actually doing the products, who can also tell us these things. Because if we were to have a expert for every single product, then I believe I would have a DG and not a unit, or maybe even bigger actually. So I think for these things it's very important. And you will also, I mean, we started now with workshops. We will be doing much more in this field as we're going ahead, and we will also be discussing more within the stakeholder context on how we organize ourselves. So it's coming.
Any reaction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think especially SMEs and just raising awareness on EU legislation is a challenge. EU legislation is unfortunately not something that the media picks up on by themselves until they are criticizing us for not implementing it fast enough. So it is a challenge. I think what we're trying to do, at least in Denmark, is really reaching out to the relevant business associations. We have one that's specific for SMEs. We're trying to reach out, but they have been difficult. It is difficult to make them aware of this, but I mean, I have another speaking engagement for a different business association in Denmark later today. So we're trying to really reach out and to make them aware of this as soon as possible. But of course, it is challenging. I mean, I'm not so worried that Microsoft will implement this lovely and great, because they have the resources to do that. But a small startup in Denmark that works with digital products with digital elements, robotics is a big thing in Denmark. That is challenging for us, no doubt, but we are focusing on it. We're trying to find the right for us on where to speak on it, to start that out, and then we're slowly trying to roll it out. I think the more we have common guidelines, the more we have common Not that we need to make lines to take, that would be too much, but the more we have common messages that we can express on this, that we know how we'll implement it, the better. But definitely it is a challenge, and it is sometimes these things go through word of mouth and you talk to someone as well. So we're really trying to spread it as much as we can, but it is challenging because it is not necessarily something that has the awareness. So we need to make it interesting enough to get that awareness first.
I would like to thank you, the speakers, for their insightful contributions, and I would like to wrap up the panel, wishing everyone speed, simplification, and stakeholders engagement going forward. So thanks a lot for your attention, and look forward to the discussions later.